And we're off. Is it okay if I have the red one?
You know that I like the red one.
Want to try it?
No, it's okay. I have to. There has to be variety in life.
Yeah.
I'm getting too attached.
True. Getting too attached to the red microphone. Hi, I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. This is Carlos Calmar, music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Good evening.
And in case you're confused, you are the audience, the most important element of all. Otherwise, we'd just be here talking to an empty room, and that would be very silly. We might have a good conversation anyway.
Oh.
I do enjoy talking with you.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. I was just thinking about, what's his name?
Hard to say.
A speech about nothing.
Oh, John Cage.
Thank you.
Yeah. Which you read.
Yeah, once upon a time. I want to do it again. I was not good.
So you want to
interesting enough, I was too slow.
You can never be too slow reading John Cage.
Yeah, but it took me
he was so slow.
But it took me an hour 15.
And it should take...
That doesn't matter.
Oh, you're supposed to do it in like 4 minutes, 33 seconds, I
No,
think.
that's a different piece.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're supposed to do it in 45. I took my time.
You did.
Oh, anyway.
Why don't we both do it together sometime? Then it would be completely It would be completely unintelligible, but it would be fun.
Okay, let's do it.
Cool. I like John Cage. But there's no Cage on tonight's program, at least not intentionally. We have a piece of music that made me wish today that I had a Mickey Mouse tie. That would have been a fun tie to wear for the first piece on the program. But I don't have a Mickey Mouse tie. Then there's a piano concerto by a kid from Brooklyn named Jacob Gershwin, much better known as George Gershwin. And then there's intermission, which is closest to a John Cage performance, I guess. And then a big suite from a lyrical ballet by Prokoviev called Cinderella. Yeah, that Cinderella story. And this is yet another of those pieces that I've never heard live, so thank you for bringing this.
Well, I mean, I will not say it from the big stage, but if you like Cinderella, Prokofiev, which I'm sure you will, you actually owe it to the persistence of this wonderful young person I'm married to.
Oh, this was her idea?
She, ever since we know each other, said, Cinderella, Cinderella, persistently. I hear it in my dreams.
They can have that effect on you, can't they?
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to thank her.
Yes.
Oh, nice. So the full-length ballet is like a couple hours long, and you've picked out a suite of about 45 minutes?
The thing is, it works exactly the same way as Romeo and Juliet. So Prokofiev had written Romeo and Juliet and he was very successful with that, and so he got the commission for Cinderella. And essentially what you do is there is the ballet, which is long, and you should see it visually, because if it's choreographed well, it's one of the most brilliant arguments in terms of how you do a ballet. Meaning it's the perfect music, probably great choreography, great dances, it has all the roles you really want. Now, after that, Prokofiev constructed, same as in Romeo and Juliet, 3 suites, which you can actually perform the way they are. But, same as in Romeo and Juliet, there are, every conductor who has something to do with this piece just takes what he wants. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Is that how you decided, just what you like the best?
Yeah.
Do you start with the first notes and end with the last?
Yes.
And then in between, follow the story? With leaving some things out?
We follow the story.
Okay.
We follow the story with, I mean, if you're really if you know the ballet by heart, you will notice that there is one movement that is kind of misplaced, but we found a good reason why that is, and that's all. And essentially, it's a little bit of a miracle that this piece exists, considering the time during which the piece was actually written, because those were not happy times, and there were not easy times in Soviet Union. We are talking about the 40s. and World War II was underway, and siege of Leningrad and Stalingrad and all the mess that happened there. So Prokofiev went about to write this, and he was quite successful in writing, wrote the first 2 acts, and then he had to stop. And essentially the piece was designed, Russia has, Soviet Union had 2 very, very, very important ballet companies, the Kirov in St. Petersburg and the Bolshoi. And this is actually written for the Kirov until he completed Act 2, and then he took a little hiatus, and I think he started writing again in 1943. In the meantime, the lead dancer, female dancer of the Kirov, for whom actually this piece was written, Galina Ulanova, went from the Kirov to the Bolshoi. So of course the piece was then completed and premiered at the Bolshoi. And enormous success, and got reproduced. And the miracle happens, I would say, that this piece is kind of all right, successful when you put it on a stage with the ballet, if you have a company that is large enough to dance it, because many, many roles. But in the concert hall, doesn't happen so often. And that is a miracle, because you have the very popular Romeo and Juliet, and then you have Cinderella, which is at least equal quality, and you think, so why do you like that and nobody does the other? So you're going to be amazed. I couldn't come up with an answer at the end. Maybe, and this is only an estimate, maybe because the tone of Cinderella is a little less dramatic. It's more lyrical. Because what Prokofiev wanted to actually focus on was the person Cinderella and the relationship between Cinderella and the prince, and the love and the drama because of the evil sisters and the stepmother and the shoe and all that. Yeah, it exists. And it's really nicely done in music, but that's not the central point. The central point is actually quite lyrical, sung. So this piece sings. Even starts that way. It sings. In this case, the first and as Robert pointed out, the first movement that we're going to play and the last piece that we are going to play are the beginning and the end of the ballet. And they are fairly similar, meaning it makes a complete arch to do it that way. And in the meantime, yes, there is the quarrel between the sisters, and there is, you know, when you talk about the quality of a piece and the wonderful things that happen in the piece, yes, there are a couple of outstanding things. One that is very audible is in the Cinderella story. Of course, we all know that when midnight happens, the positive spell disappears. So you hear the midnight music. That is really, yeah, you hear the clock. It's I would say, quite harsh, that type of music. It's very fiery, and that is obvious that you hear that. You hear things like when Cinderella goes to the ball, you hear the urgency with which she's kind of like, I'm so excited, and then she goes, and you can hear that in the music. And of course you hear what you expect from a composer like Prokofiev, which is, when it comes to something like a love scene, it breaks your heart. But if there is one little element in this music that every time I hear it, it blows me away how a composer can actually find that color. It is when Cinderella appears at the ball. I mean, when Cinderella, in her incredible gown, enters the ballroom, because what do you actually expect when the lady of the plot enters a grand ball which is probably filled with 250 dancers? You think it will be one of those, and it's exactly the opposite. And what I think it is it is like somebody dressed in light comes to your door, and you look at this person, Cinderella in this case, and she's so beautiful that you think, I can't go near her because she's made out of crystal and I will break her. That beginning of that movement, you will hear it, is an astounding piece of music. So I hope you get excited about this music.
I already am. Thank you. I love Prokofiev. Yeah. There's a big piano concerto on this program by George Gershwin. It's kind of an expanded version of Rhapsody in Blue, sorta. Walter Damrosch, conductor, was at the premiere of Rhapsody in Blue in 1924. Huge, amazing, life-changing concert for a lot of people. And the very next day, he contacted George Gershwin to commission a piano concerto, to take that idea and expand it into a 3-movement concerto. And it's really big, swanky, elegant, powerful, fun. And it actually has 2 soloists, because the trumpet solo, the bluesy trumpet solo in the slow movement, is so cool. And Gershwin asks that the player play his trumpet into a gentleman's felt hat, if one is available.
Well, actually, Jeffrey, we have such a phenomenal soloist, Jeffrey Kahane. I really love Jeffrey and his playing. Jeffrey told me the story that when, if I remembered well, Damrosch himself premiered this piece with Gershwin at the piano. And you have to remember which times we are talking. It's long ago. And he said that Gershwin came to the rehearsal, sat at the piano, and with a lit cigar in his mouth, and smoked through the rehearsal while he was playing. And New York
What a class act, huh?
Yeah. New York Philharmonic was livid because they thought, where is the respect? And I thought, like, those were cool times.
1925, smack in the middle of the roaring 20s. It must have been really exciting.
Actually, it was very exciting, and of course the fact that so there are a couple of stories about this piece, or about actually Gershwin himself. First of all, a source which probably can be trusted alleges that when Damrosch went to Gershwin and said, I just heard your Rhapsody in Blue, it blows me away, you're a genius, blah, 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 blah. You please write a piano concerto for us. Gershwin accepted and then went out and to buy a book about composition. How do you actually write a piano concerto? Maybe not that harsh, but that story is true. It's not a legend per itself. Now, that might tell that story that Gershwin didn't really know what he was doing. Not true at all. I mean, he really knew how to write music. What he probably didn't know so well, considering what type of music he was actually writing and what music he was very familiar to, is what is the form, architectural form of a concerto? What is that? How should I do it? Because probably he would have written an expanded Rhapsody in Blue that sounds half like an improvisation. There is occasionally some interaction with the orchestra and that's it. But that doesn't carry over 35 minutes, 33 minutes, whatever it lasts, the concerto. So it was, of course, a great idea that he looked up, and in the end. So here, the interesting thing is that the most famous pieces by George Gershwin, aside from the Rhapsody, are all European style. the concerto that you're going to hear is really a concerto. Porgy and Bess is an opera. It's not it's a real opera. And last but certainly not least, An American in Paris, this phenomenal piece of music, is a symphonic poem, nothing else, which are forms that existed over, well, quite a time in Europe. So with that in mind. Now the thing is that is so kind of funny is we all know Gershwin, one way or the other. We all worship Rhapsody in Blue and this concerto and other pieces. I really think this is one of the greatest talents that existed in the 20th century. And the surprise is that if you go in the musical history as far away as you can from Mr. Gershwin, and you think, okay, we are talking about the first 2 decades or so of the 20th century, what was actually going on in music and who was one of the undoubtedly most influential composers transforming everything that we know of, you end by Arnold Schönberg, modernist, 12-tone, the scare of the city, etc., etc. Well, you could never imagine that these two people, Gershwin and Schönberg, would meet, but they did. And yes, they became really good friends. And yes, both of them really appreciated it. Actually, Schönberg was the guy who wrote that Gershwin is so musical and that he has to be a composer and that he breathes music, he eats music, everything is music about Gershwin, and was a great admirer, Arnold Schönberg. Nonetheless, in his, stories about the genius Gershwin, of course, was kind of very aware of his limitations in terms of classical forms. Yes, he could write songs and stuff like that, or a little blues here and there, but he kind of thought that's it. And when it came to the bigger form, so he's reached out to very famous fellow composers. So he asked 2 really famous composers to be their student. He asked Maurice Ravel, can I be your student and study composition? And Ravel said no. And he asked Igor Stravinsky, can I be your student? And so they met, and Stravinsky asked Gershwin, so how much money do you make? And Gershwin said, well, 20s. I make about $100,000 a year. And Stravinsky said, maybe I should be your student instead. So to put everything, now that brings us to this fantastic concert, which is really the normal format of a concert. Fast movement, slow movement, very fast movement, which is the way we know concerts. And the thing that Gershwin does so well is connecting popular music with classical music, meaning also something that Schönberg said about Gershwin was he's the everyday's man musician, meaning everybody understands him. And so he writes this concerto, and he was very successful, and it was great. And yes, he smoked during the rehearsal, not during the performance, I guess. And his career, you can imagine that actually Gershwin could have been satisfied with the great recognition that he received during his lifetime, because he was being worshipped. But there was still something bugging him. And so there is also this anecdote where 2 weeks before he died very early. 2 weeks before, he was in contact with Sam Goldwyn, Metro Goldwyn, in Hollywood. And Sam Goldwyn said, why don't you write music like Irving Berlin? That's really good music. That wasn't, Sam Goldwyn and composers. Sam Goldwyn, I think, was the guy who said to Schönberg, I'm a great admirer of your lovely music. to which Schoenberg, of course, said, "My music is not lovely," and left. But that's a different story.
Yeah, how to get caught lying in one easy lesson. And what about Jeffrey Kahane, our soloist tonight?
Oh,
Does he bring something special to this piece?
I mean, Jeffrey is one of the most musical pianists I even know. And I had the pleasure, this is, I think, our third or fourth collaboration. So we started with Mozart. It was one of, I mean, this, just to give you a little bit of understanding, you probably know by now, since you have endured me as your music director for 11 years, that the word is out that I'm very demanding. A friend of mine who worked many, many years with me said about my relationship with Mozart, I'm like no forgiveness to anybody. And he said, you know, Carlos, you and Mr. Mozart have a private party and not many musicians are invited to that one. Well, guess what? Jeffrey Kahane, anytime. Because Jeffrey, he just knows how to do that. And then we played Beethoven, and boy, of course he knows how to do that. And then he comes to Gershwin, and it's amazing. I mean, aside from the obvious that you need a pianist that has fabulous technique, he is always a musician who goes, while taking the time that a piece allows and that is needed, who goes for the flow of music. Music flows through his hands, and even though he understands probably this piece, I'm putting words in his thinking, as a kind of classical piece of music, it still has this jazzy, light tone when it's needed. So we are, I mean, the orchestra, we are just happy to have him here.
I noticed something interesting in Mr. Kahane's bio in your program. It's a typical classical music artist bio. He's played here, he's played there, he's played with this orchestra and that conductor, and he's won this award and that award, and it's all very, very impressive. And then where is that sentence? Native of Los Angeles, graduate of San Francisco Conservatory, finalist of Van Cliburn, recipient of the Avery Fisher Prize. Yeah. An avid linguist who reads widely in a number of ancient and modern languages, Mr. Kahane received a master's degree in classics from the University of Colorado at Boulder in 2011. What, the music career isn't enough? The guy's a genius.
Yes, he is.
People annoy me, I'll tell you.
Trust me, they do. I think like as if a music career, being a pianist.
And he's a conductor.
And as a conductor, that is not enough. You have to just study something else on the side. God.
Well, let's leave him behind and move on to Paul Dukas and Goethe and the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And should we bypass that movie that I alluded to already and just go back to the source? What do you think?
So, I mean, please show hands. Who has actually read Goethe's Sorcerer's Apprentice? Okay.
This is pass-fail, right?
I mean, I always wonder about when you grow up in an English-speaking country, what actually do you learn when you are a kid? Meaning, what? No. This is...
Whatever it is, we learn it from cereal boxes, I can tell you that much.
No, the question is, when you go to school, and yeah, what are... so I'm trying to still find out, what are the poems that... Is it "O Captain, My Captain"?
We do Robert Frost.
Well, Robert Frost, yeah, that's a genius.
Not Goethe, not Goethe.
It's not, the thing is, I have to acknowledge that it's not
Or Schopenhauer, we don't do Schopenhauer.
Who wants to read Schopenhauer?
Yeah,
okay,
no.
never mind. You don't need to read Goethe in the sense of educating children in literature, because at the end of the day, when I was a kid, I remember learning in school Goethe, Schiller, because I speak Spanish too, Cervantes, and others, Lope de Vega, etc. But those are lyricists, poets, writers who wrote in their mother tongue, and I could speak there. And so that's why I think, never mind with Goethe. Now, never mind with Goethe for children, but it's amazing because I still, don't make me do it, I can recite The Sorcerer's Apprentice beginning, the first 6 lines, just like this. Because when you learn something when you are 9, or whatever age I was, we learned ballads at school, we memorized them. So I can, now I'm slightly over 9 years old, and I still, it's something you never forget. And so this is like, it's the bread and butter of just German language. And the ballad is so amazingly beautiful. And yes, you kind of hate Walt Disney for doing what he does, but on the other side, you adore Walt Disney, because who would know about this piece, which is such a fantastic piece of music, if Mickey Mouse wouldn't be that?
Well, and you know what else is really cool? In the movie, the sorcerer's name is Disney spelled backwards. Cool, huh?
Wow.
Goethe didn't think of that.
Well, I kind of joke and say Goethe actually wrote this for Mickey Mouse, but never mind. The thing is that, I mean, everything is kind of funny with this piece, because it might even be true that Paul Dukas, this composer who was so critical of himself and who was actually a very serious composer and very serious human being, and who burned so many of his compositions because he didn't accept the result. And then he writes The Sorcerer's Apprentice kind of like he thought about, this is a joke. I'm going to write a joke. Meaning, I'm going to write a joke because in my time, said Dukas, symphonic poetry is getting so obnoxious that you can actually see every word that is, for example, in a poem, described through music. And that annoyed him, because he was more the guy who liked absolute music. He wrote symphony that nobody really plays, and the other pieces. And then he said, okay, I'm going to mock symphonic poem, and I will take something, a little story, Sorcerer's Apprentice, and I will write music so that you can literally follow everything. Meaning the broom is the broom, Mickey Mouse is Mickey Mouse, and the water is the water, etc.
So he's kind of making fun of like Richard Strauss?
He's kind of making fun of everything, but boy, he's... And then the tragedy happens that nobody really wants, which is you don't want to be a one-work composer. You don't want to be Dukas who only wrote Sorcerer's Apprentice, you think. You do not want to be Pietro Mascagni, who only wrote Cavalleria Rusticana, and you don't want to be Gustav Holst, who really hated the fact that he wrote The Planets, although that was his best piece, or most successful. So Sorcerer's Apprentice, and so he follows really the story as written by Goethe, who took this from ancient Greece history. This is a very old story of this sorcerer's apprentice who, when the old sorcerer is gone, thinks, oh, I can do spells too. And then the chore of this apprentice is actually to bring water to a well. And he says, I'm not in the mood, I can't spell. I can cast a spell, so he casts a spell on the broom. And the broom starts to get water from the well. But unfortunately, the apprentice doesn't know how to stop the broom. And so there is a lot of water. in the room. And then in the middle of the piece, and you can literally hear everything. You hear the start of the piece where there is this silence, and you know that you are in the home of a sorcerer because it's spooky. And finally, you hear the first kind of, oh, the broom is moving, and then the broom goes to the well and gets the, and then you hear water, and you hear more water, and finally the apprentice gets desperate, and you hear in the music that he catches a hatchet and hacks the broom into silence. And then unfortunately both pieces of broom start to work the well. Bad luck. And you can hear that in the music that there are two. Because first it's the bassoons, and then it's the clarinets, and then big water, and you hear that at the end everything gets so dramatic, and you kind of hear the desperation in the music for, oh God, I hope the sorcerer comes home and helps me. And then it stops on the most dramatic point, it stops dead on its tracks. The music, the silence is fantastic. And then water comes down, and then there is an ending, which of course in the interpretation, if I remember that well, from Fantasia, at the ending, this yatatatam at the end is kind of a symbol of the sorcerer smacking the apprentice, probably. And with that, the piece ends. And yes, it all might have been a joke by Mr. Dukas, and yes, it's all being popularized by the wonderful Walt Disney, but still it's one of the best pieces of music you can actually have. It's brilliantly written, very well instrumentated, short-lived, energetic, everything.
We have to stop. Da-da-da-dum.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for coming. Carlos Comar.
Robert McBride.